Hi guys, I've got a nice little level here that I'm building up. I'm probably going to change the shape of this quite a lot, so I need to cut parts out of it and create the own level sections myself. But one of the first things I always do is rebuild all the textures. So instead of having all separate textures for emissive, normal maps, ambient occlusion, roughness, all that sort of stuff, I just bake it all into the one texture. It actually turns out overall better than using separate textures. That's just my opinion on that. Feel free to disagree. But anyway, with CopperCube you can only use one texture, so that's really why I do it. It's more work, but it actually comes out quite well. And on top of that, I add an extra nice little couple of tricks to it to even give it an even more better look to the texture. So for example, this corner here, I want to update that texture. That's this one here. Okay, so let's just go ahead and grab the textures. So I've got me textures. I always keep the original textures in case I want to redo anything, and then I have a separate section for the built textures. I'll show you how I did this one. I think you've already done this one, but I'll show you how I did it. Okay, so that's the texture. Outer corner. Okay, so it starts here, and it's all those textures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 textures. We're going to add all bake into one texture. Now I use GIMP. That's just because it's free. It's not the easiest program to use, but it's actually not hard at all. It's pretty simple for the most part. I'm going to bake all those textures into one texture. Probably Photoshop is probably a lot better, frankly, but I haven't really used it. I've heard good things about it. Anyway, GIMP will do the trick. As long as you know how to use it, it's fine. It's not hard. It's not hard like Blender. Blender is a bit of a pain of a program, but once you know how to use it, it's good. Okay, so here's our texture. Very plain, flat, boring, you could almost say. Now how you bake the textures in what order makes a difference. It definitely makes a difference. So this is how I've been going at it just recently. So here's the loaded. This is a combined metallic and smoothness. It has it both in one texture. Some programs can use that, which is interesting. So it's already, you can tell by it's a PNG file or transparency. It's already loaded like that. Now we don't want the white, we just want the dark side of it, so we'll just get rid of the white. So just go color to alpha, white by default, boom, it's correct, and then we just drop that in over the top of the main texture. Hold left click, hold it, drag it in, and then just release it there. Now typically I don't want the full, because you might be importing a bit of metallic stuff in there that has no interest for the texture at all. You can't use that in CopperCube, but you can use the roughness. That's very rough. I don't know if I want it that rough. Putting a lot of dirt and stuff into it. I'll just back it off a little bit. How about, what do we got? About 80% I've been going with this one. That's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I don't overdo it. In any of these things, don't overdo it. Just get the nice balance. If you're not sure, just back it off a little bit typically. Okay, so merge that down. That's one texture now, done. Now the next trick is to apply to emboss the texture. It actually adds a really nice extra detail that you can't seem to get any other way that I'm aware of. It really gives it a lot more three-dimensional effect to the texture. Even if you didn't have any normal map, it would still make the texture pretty good, a lot better. So this is my nice little trick that I like to do. Now the order is important, so I've added the roughness in, so then I can use a bit of that roughness into the embossing. I only do that before I add in the normal map, the emissive and the ambient occlusion. I mean, theoretically I could add the ambient occlusion and then do it. I haven't actually tried that. I'm just don't know if that's going to be any good. But here we go, distort. So filters, distort, emboss. You can see this is a very powerful little tool. You can do so much with it. Obviously you don't want that, so I've got a little preset. I'll just use that one. So that's got the azimuth, doesn't really matter that much. The elevation makes all the difference. The depth makes a lot of difference as well. So I typically have depth almost 0 and elevation about 62. Well, for this one, each and every texture will be different. So as you can see, it's actually made the white parts to be like three-dimensional to stand out. Very cool. So so even the painted on textures in a sense have now a three-dimensional look to it, which is, it gives it a lot more depth to the texture. So that's pretty cool. All right, so now we can go to AO. There's ambient occlusion, just white and dark shades. If it's varying shades of darkness, you know that's the AO with the white background typically. We don't want the white, so we just go color to alpha. So in other words, get rid of the white. Boom, that's done. That's fine as it is. Just grab it, left click, hold, drag it across. Boom, there it is there. So that's not too bad. Nice, probably if it's a bit darker, but that's okay. Merge down. Next on the list is emissive. Now, yeah, the normal map should be done last because that will override a lot of stuff. If you put the emissive after the normal map, it'll override some of the normal map detail. You don't want that. So, yeah, so now we get rid of the black, of course. So color to alpha. Change the color from white. Just drag it left to the bottom left. And there it is. Black. Get rid of the black. Done. Now that color, I don't like that color. I'm going to change that color. Color, hue chroma. Let's beef up the chroma so I can see what I'm doing. And change the color. Blue, yeah. Like, yeah, that looks good, that color. I don't want it so bright like that. Let's bring up the intensity, the lightness. Something like that, yeah. Actually, we'll back it off a bit. About there. I'm pretty happy with that. That's good. Left click, hold it, bring it across, and boom. Gives it, drop that in there. I mean, it'd be nice if CopperCube could, there probably is a shader you could make to blend the emissive separate texture into the main texture so that you can use code to vary the amounts over time. Ideally, that would be the best way to do it, actually. But for now, I'll just stick with this. I don't have a method for that. If maybe just in case would like to have a go at that, would be awesome, because that would be a very, very important shader that I would use in my game, because my game uses a lot of varying amounts of battery power in a sense of the spaceship for the lights, so it's constantly dynamically changing. So ideally, it needs a shader to do that, but I haven't got that set up yet. Anyway, so we'll go with this. Now the last one after emissive is the normal map. The beautiful normal map. Now you can see there's a detail there, but it's very hidden, a lot of hidden detail, and there's some parts here that really stands out quite a lot, so you couldn't really do much with that. I suppose you could selectively sharpen certain areas. Actually, you could do that actually. So if you didn't want, if the detail is just not sufficient, what you can do is a nice little trick. You can go filters, enhance, and then sharpen the texture up, even normal maps. So if I push that all the way to the right, it's brought out the detail this a bit more, but that there maybe could be arguably too much. Hard to say about that one. Let's try it and see. And it's also any roughness and different artifacts and stuff on the texture, it shows up more. That can be a good thing actually, I think. So now you're getting a bit of a three-dimensional lighting effect to different parts of the texture. This part of it might be too strong. Let's just see. Color, go desaturate, desaturate. Now that is pretty good. Obviously the white, we're only looking at the whiteness and the dark areas we're going to apply as the normal map. We're going to, that's grey background, we're going to get rid of that. But it's added some nice extra detail. That's luminance. I typically use luma. It seems to accentuate the darkness and the lightness better to me, and it may even give the texture a bit more of a shine effect. I think it does. So I'm going to get rid of the grey, so go color to alpha again. Now you don't want white, don't leave the white, we want some of the white, so we just change that to a background default grey, which is pretty much anywhere except for the white parts. Just click on a generic grey section. Boom. What if you want the darkness but not so much whiteness? Okay, well you could probably do that. You could just go color to alpha white, so it's got rid of the white. But here on this version of GIMP, It used to, yeah, it used to be able to change, and you would visually see the change of different whiteness. But for some reason, I don't know, this version could be broken. I don't know. But it doesn't work. It's not showing up anything. So I'll just leave it default, and I'll adjust it in the main texture. So just left click, hold, drop it in, boom, look at all the extra detail. Now obviously some parts of it, see how by sharpening that normal map, you're getting a nice lot of detail coming through onto the main texture. Instead of this basic flat grey, you're getting a nice lot of sharp highlights, detail. It looks actually really good. This part of it here is arguably too much. It's too much, so let's have to back it off. So we're backing off both the darkness and the lightness. So that's 0. Makes a massive effect, the normal map. Yeah, I mean, had we really put a lot more care and detail into it, we would just we would segregate this section and do the rest of it the same to get all the detail, but not too much detail on this box here. Now that's too much brightness, maybe a bit too much. Back it off somewhere there. I'm happy with that. I'll back it off a little bit. Yeah, maybe 50. Each texture will be different. So the whiteness, you could go up to opacity, a full opacity of 100% if the background is basically very light color, because it will then show up correctly. But if it's a black color, you have to drop it right down because it'll show up too much. So each texture will be different, in other words. I really like how the background is, when you give it a full opacity, it really shows the background, all those nice little details. That's excellent. But yeah, that box itself has to be dropped back. It's too much. Let's go something like that. Pretty happy with that. 55. Each texture will be different, but for now that's pretty good. I think a good start. So now we go export that out, save into my main section. So these are all 2K textures. If it was 4K textures, I'd still be saving 4K, because in my game I have 3 levels of texture quality: 4K, 2K and 1K. Okay, so now let's load that texture in. Go to this is it. Okay, I've got 2 versions. Is that right? Yeah. So this is the new texture I've got. Okay. So now we'll add that in. Watch it now. Boom. Look at all that detail. Beautiful detail. Heaps better. It's like anything, you want to get the detail in, but don't overdo it. Just get a nice balance. You can easily overdo it with the whiteness, with the different things. I think that's pretty good. And when you add it in, if you see it's something wrong, you can always go back and readjust it in GIMP and re-save over the old texture. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. That looks good. Way better than what it was. Let's do one more example before I move on to other things. Okay, haven't done this texture yet. Let's do that one just for interest. Now I want to see what it's updating. So I've just applied a generic red so I can see what's it doing. Oh, here it is. Over here. Alright. So that's basic, pretty plain texture. No real detail. Obviously when you add the normal map details in, all this stuff will stand out a lot better. It's just totally flat at the moment. Let's grab that texture and do that. This one. There it is. Wall extension. Open with GIMP. Wall extension AO. There's smooth as metallic. So if there was a metallic texture by itself, you wouldn't be able to use it. It does nothing to the texture at all. But if this particular one has both metallic and smoothness, so that's interesting. So I can use the roughness part of it. Yeah. Okay, so that's the textures. 1, 2, 3, 4. What? Oh, there's no emissive on this one. Okay. Alright. Okay, so roughness first, so we want the dark part of it, so just get rid of the white, color to alpha, drop it in. Now that looks too much to me, so in other words, it's supposed to be like a grey or slightly darker grey, but not black. I don't think it's meant to be black. Yeah, so we want a bit of roughness in there, but we don't want to go overboard with it. So it's totally plain by itself. Give it a bit of dark and highlights. We can always brighten the color of the texture later if it's too dark, but we just want a bit of accentuations of the roughness into the texture. That looks, I don't know, that looks pretty good there, about 60 something percent. Merge that down. Might not, we may need to brighten the texture a bit later. Alright, so now I'm gonna go filters, distort, emboss. It's amazing, this embossment thing. Look, that can do some incredible things. But anyway, I'm just going to use the same setup I had before. So elevation around, I think around 100 is halfway. And that'll be sort of a medium level. You can, and backwards will be going strongly one way, and then to the right of that will go strongly the other way. Something like that. That's how it works. Yeah, so you want to give it a nice bit of embossing, but don't go overboard with it. You can go easily too far with it. But that's a nice level I've come up with. Okay, so yep, color to alpha. Just want that. Yep, that one. Boom, bit of shading baked into the texture. Merge that down, and then there's no emissive, so we might sharpen this one up again like before. Can't see why not. Give it a bit more detail, otherwise it becomes a little bit blurred. Depends how you want to do it. I like detail, as much detail as possible personally. So let's go fully on that one. Color, desaturate, desaturate, luma. So it's really got a lot of bright contrasting dark and white areas. Luma seems to do that. Color to alpha, get rid of the grey. Just click on that little box. There's generic grey, it was all over the place, generic grey, so that's fine. Drag that across, and that's way too much white, so let's back it off. Let's go to 0 and have a look at it, and then just bring it up. Yeah, so what's that, piping or something? Don't want to go too far with that. I want to make it look sort of mold in quite nicely, but without going too far. That's probably a bit too far, I think. Yeah, somewhere there. That looks pretty good. Okay, so that texture's done. I always PNG myself. That's it. It compresses the texture, so it uses up less space, but doesn't lose any. It's a lossless format, so you don't lose any quality. If you use JPEG, it compresses it really well, but you do lose a bit of detail. So that's why I don't use JPEG. I don't want to lose detail. I prefer to have a little bit more size, but more detail. And if I ever want to redo anything in the future, well, I can just adjust the PNG. You haven't lost any detail. But if you use JPEG, every time you save it, you're losing detail. It's a problem, actually. Alright, let's have a look how we go with this one. So there it is. That one and that one. Yeah, it's not bad. Not too bad. Definitely better. Didn't make a huge difference, but it's definitely noticeable even still for that particular texture. You notice it's not really shiny. You can add shine in with CopperCube itself if it's not shiny enough. Can do that. but it's okay. I think certain parts of it, you want to have differences of shine and not shine. I think really, ideally, that's the best way to look the best. Yeah, I mean, if a shader could be run to pick up any metallic or combine metallic smoothness textures so that it can then shine certain parts of it more than others, which is typically how you should do it. That works the best way. A shader to do that would be awesome. I know Just In Case made a shader for that, but that overrides the default CopperCube lighting system, actually. Pretty sure. So you can't use all the spotlights, point lights, and directional lights with it without using the existing shader Just In Case created with all that combined in one. It has 5 point lights in it, whereas I like to use CopperCube default because you've got 10. You can use 10 point lights or 10 spotlights. It's a lot more lighting. Makes a massive difference for my game. The lighting. It's a huge part of any game to make it look good. 5 is for me a little bit limited. It's better than 4, but 10 is good. That's a good basic. 10 I can do 10. All right. So what else? Yeah, so in that regard, shaders really are good for just shading a specific thing that has it's not affected by the lighting in the game. Trying to think of something. It's like a three-dimensional overlay in front of the camera, like a shader to change the transparency, like the one I made up. That's all right because it doesn't need to be affected by any lighting in the game. It goes straight in front of the camera. Those shaders are good. I'll get to fix that up. I cut that out accidentally. Yeah, those type of shaders are good. So this is a texture I've rebuilt. I'll just change the lighting, get the light across so you can see it. A lot of detail, really nice, lot of detail. I'll show you the original texture. I have to go and load it. Okay, one sec. That's the original texture by itself. Pretty boring. I mean, it's not terrible, you could still use it, but it's way better when you rebuild the textures with the method I use. So you got that, and then that, a lot more detail. Yeah, heaps more detail. It's cool. I haven't embossed this one. Some of them, oh, I've got to accidentally cut that. I have to fix that too. Yeah, so heaps more detail. Pretty cool. Damn, I've got a few things I've got to fix. I went around this level and started cutting out things that I didn't really need because the polygon count was just too high. It's already at 394,000. That's heading up to the limit that I prefer to have. But then again, that's with a single combined mesh. I could still run it like this fine, but I'm going to create separate rooms anyway. So you could theoretically you could have almost unlimited amount of polygons by just separating all the rooms and just hiding everything except for the room that you're in and maybe the room that you came from, and just keep moving around like that. So you only ever, say for example, each room 200,000 polygons. That's pretty reasonable. You could do that and it will look really good. So 2 rooms of 400,000. 400,000 you can run on a PC, no problem. But and then just keep doing that the whole way. So you're only ever showing 400,000 polygons, just shutting everything off. That you're not visible. You could actually have unlimited polygons that way in your level. Has the floor, pretty cool, huh? Nice bit of detail there. I'll show you the original, then an alternative one I made, and that's the original floor tile there. This is the original, extremely plain, very basic. Now I made 2 versions of this one. One of them I embossed and one of them I didn't emboss. I can't remember which one's which. So this is the upgraded texture. Looks a lot better, doesn't it? Yeah, that one's not embossed. Still looks good, looks really good. You'd be happy with that. Pretty happy with that. Nice big detail on the ground as well, everything looking good. But even better, I got an embossed version. Wrong one. This is the embossed version, even more detail. See, even the paint is like raised up, has a 3D effect to it, so that's even better again. So that's cool, isn't it? Yeah, very nice. So that's a quick overview of texture rebuilding, and now we're going to talk about building your level using my plugin grid snapping. Well, PMax started the plugin actually, and I've adjusted it quite a bit actually with various things. Okay, alright. So this is the level. I put this into CopperCube and it was like 500,000 polygons, and it wasn't running very fast. The frames rate was reduced quite significantly. So for me, I had to redo all this one from scratch. So the level wasn't particularly interesting anyway, just basically 4 rooms. That's just the default prefab that comes in, I bought from Unity. Yeah, so I don't really want that anyway. I'll just redo the whole thing. So what I did was split up import the parts. So I just imported the parts separately, and I decimated each part separately by itself for optimal low polygons, because that's always an issue with CopperCube actually. And touch the textures, and then export it all into CopperCube and split it up, and I can work with it each part separately that way. Yeah, so that's what I did. And yeah, it seems like the polygon count's a lot better. At least like it's looking that way anyway. So I've imported it into CopperCube. Here's all the parts. It's only about 11,000 polygons at the moment. That's just the basic parts. There's a couple of duplications included in that, so it's not too bad. If I can get each separate room to be about 100 to 150,000 polygons or less, I'm personally happy with that. So each room I'm going to have separate rooms, and I just always hide and unhide rooms that are not used. So I unhide the current room and the last room that the player was in. So I always have 2 rooms active in my game at the moment. It just makes it a bit smoother. Alright, so here's building a level. Now this one here, I had to rebuild how it was done originally in the game. It was not set up that way. So in here, the developers had, I like the orange personally. I like the orange one. There's a red and there's a grey one, but I like the orange one. The problem is I didn't like their design, how they've got this here. It's not lined up with this section here. There's nothing lined up. It's nice if that orange was lined up with the orange in the middle, and then grey above and below, like these corner pieces. So I remade it. It had to be done manually, unfortunately. Now, how do I know what scale to use? Normally, it was pretty straightforward for this particular asset. It actually tells you, okay, so in the textures, it actually tells you the size. So in this case, it's, what's that, 1x2, 4x4, 2x4. There's another one called 2x4. So everything's in factors of about 2, typically. So there's a 2x4. So in other words, if I just have the scale of 2, it's pretty straightforward. Everything lines up, and it did actually. I didn't have to change hardly anything. So yeah, so for example, that one, I go shift space. It's already grid scale for grid size 2. Yeah, so there's no, I didn't have to change hardly anything except for this one here. I changed the position, so I wanted the lights up top and this one at the bottom, and I wanted the orange in the middle. They didn't actually have that set up on any of their prefabs, so I just moved it about, resized it so the orange here is lining up with here, and that's lining up with that, lining up, so more or less lining up with how it's supposed to be. I think it looks better that way. At least I think it will look a lot better. Okay, so now you've got to remember when you're using the grid snapping, centering the pivot point is always a must, has to be done, and what it will do is trying to fit it in the middle of the one next to it, in other words. Now this was an awkward one because that's okay, theoretically it's, I'll just measure it up, it's actually 16 by 16 by 16, still a factor of 2. This one here, once I set it up, it was sitting about like that with a tiny gap, and it was not right. It's because it's trying to combine a paper thin, well, okay, well, a very thin one, so it's looking at the whole box, that to there, so it's looking at from that to there, as in the depth of that in the middle, to stick it in the middle, the edge of this one. So basically what was not lining up, even though I had set the grid scale to 2, so what I just did was I just added a copy of the one at the front and stick it at the back like that. So that's increased the total depth. So in other words, when I recentered the pivot point and control space, it then would then bring it forward a little bit and then take away that gap. So that's alright now, it's fine. And that's here, over here is just an exact copy of that one. So I'm just building the level up now. So just move it across close and then snap it with control space. Yeah, so that's lined up nicely. So from here on in, it's going to be pretty, it shouldn't be too hard. There's a couple of little tricky things. So it's just getting all the assets lined up and adjusted perfectly to start with, and then it will be easy just to build it up quickly and easily. So here's a floor. Control, it's 16 by, the y-axis here is sort of ignored, so 16 by 16 is really what. So that's already sized up. Grid size 2, so I just go, there you go, control space, and it's lined it up. So that's lined up, yep, perfectly good there. Okay, well that is a bit out there for some reason. Let's check that again. Okay, so the smaller the grid scale you use, the more, there you go, it just was out by 2, so it'll always grid snap it to the next closest grid. If it's a small scale, then it could go the wrong way. So the bigger the grid size, the easier it is to snap it, but then typically what happens, it'll resize your meshes in a way that you may not like it so much. So there's a bit of a balance there. Somewhere between 2 and 5 is, I don't know, it's typical. So if you're just a little bit careful, it's not too bad. So I'll just put that close and boom, control space, done. This one, control C, copy, move it across, control, there we go. So it's going pretty, pretty quick now. This one, let's just do another one of those, I'd say. Control C, put it close, boom. Let's do a nice corner piece, so let's grab a copy of that, bring it over. Now I've got a rotational adjustment as well. If you don't want to manually adjust it, just go alternate space, there you go, to the nearest 90 degrees, I think it is that right? Grid angle 45, or let's just make it 90, make it easier. Okay, so now we just got to move it to the close and snap it, boom, done. This one needs another copy of that. So you can see it is pretty quick. Once you've set it up right, then it's all pretty smooth sailing, pretty nice. So it's all lining up really good. No gaps, nothing, beautiful. So I did spend a lot of time setting up these meshes really nicely to start with, because once you're setting up the level, making heaps of copies of stuff, you don't want to go back and have to edit each one manually. You want it all perfect to start with, and then go ahead and build your level. So what I've done with this, I've put separate transparent textures overlapping the lights, if you like. Just for example, on a whole stack of them, they have this same thing. So all I have to do is change the emissive, and it turns on that light. And that's pretty much with all the meshes. Most of the meshes have the same thing, a little light ability to turn on the lights. And yeah, okay, so that's pretty nice. I like the corners, and it's got the orange like a bar, so it goes all the way around. That looks better. In my opinion, that looks way better than how the developers had just sort of thrown it together previously. So you can see there's all sorts of weird and wonderful combinations. I don't know. I suppose it's not terrible, but I didn't like it much. It could be. I saw room for improvement. Put it that way. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So the grey in the middle, the orange around the edges. That's not too bad, but it doesn't line up with the other meshes. That's the only problem. So that's why I redid it. I might mix it up a bit as well. It's always nice to have a bit of a mix and match, change things around, a bit of random stuff, you know. Okay, so let's finish this room off. So okay, so what are we doing here? Let's do a yeah, let's do. Okay, so 2 by 2. So just grab that close, control space. Okay, so how are we going to do the walkway? Okay. Let's just highlight all that and go control C. See what happens. What happens if we do this? Did that even work? Okay, it works on one of them, the first one by the looks of it. So you just got to go back and join them up properly. Yeah, there's a slight gap there. And I want to keep a copy of this separately by itself so I can reuse that in the future as well. So before I join it up together as one mesh. So that's a backup. All right. Yeah. If I wanted to, I could join these two meshes up now. Doesn't really matter that much. It might be a little bit quicker. Perhaps. Okay. So what's that? Okay, 1 into 4. So I'll start with 1. So there's 1 there. We go. Tools, merge into wall. Was it wall 4? Wasn't it? Yeah. So now I have to make sure I reset it to the pivot point. Otherwise, it's not going to work right. Yeah. Because this is child noded to. Oh no, it's not. It's not child noded to anything. Oh, it still works. Sometimes if you recenter the pivot point, it's not child noded, it can change position. So I've got that. I'll just call that wall double. So I know. Okay. Control C. Move it across. We'll just rotate it. Alternate space. And then move it a little bit. Just make sure it's close. And there we go. Done. So it is quick and easy once you've got the assets all lined up properly. But I did have to manually create this single panel of this thing by itself in the beginning. I couldn't use the grid scale to match it up because it was because I've manually changed the scale completely compared to what the developers have made. So this central orange section is much what is it? It's much thinner than it was, yeah, the original asset. So I've readjusted everything. But once I combined that into one, got it all, no gaps and everything nice. I did have to line it up manually. Then I can rescale it with a factor of 2 and have everything match up really nice. Let's grab a copy of that, move it over. Okay, so put that there, control space, line it up. Do I want to? No, there's no reason to change the design, I don't think. That's why I'm not joining it up permanently just yet until I've finished happy with everything. I can always change it later. But you can see it's really quick. Control C, copy, just automatically creates a copy. Control space, lines it up. Boom, done. Really quick and easy. Okay, so let's do some nice corners. Control C. Let's just quickly rotate that a little bit. Alternate space and move it a bit, and control space. Boom. See, it's super quick, really quick. Quick and easy, no problem at all. Probably copy that one. Oop. A bit closer. There we are. Done. No gaps. Beautiful. Very nice. So yeah, I don't like the floor. If I want to change some of it later, I can always change it. But just for now, you can see how I'm doing it, and it's coming on pretty good. Pretty happy with it. Let's finish off the floor. Control C. Push that over there. Control space. Boom. How are we going to do? Let's just do the whole floor like that and see what it looks like. Control space. Control C, control control space. Is that right? Is that right? Yeah, that's right. I'll just get in there. Also, I forgot to mention at the start of the video, I resized all the assets a lot bigger because it is easier to you don't want to be see the speed at which you're moving around the level with the cursor keys. You don't want to have massive jumps with each cursor press. It's too hard to see problems actually because you skip over it really quickly. Yeah, so scale it up. You can always rescale everything down later on once you're really happy with it. And it's all you've joined up all the individual meshes. Everything's done and dusted. Then you can rescale it all properly later on. So what I'm doing is having separate rooms so that I can switch on and off. So hallway is a type of a room, the common hallway that is, and each room is its own room as well, so it'll all be switching on and off. Okay, so now we want a doorway. Haven't done the doorway yet. Let's have a look at that. Rotate it, just roughly alternate space, control space. Okay, so where do we want this? Somewhere there, I suppose. Okay, I've just snapped it and it snapped in that position. Yeah, it's right in the middle. Maybe it shouldn't be that. It should be more like that, I think. Yeah, right in the middle. Yeah, that's where it should be, I think. Okay, so, and typically beside that, in here, I'm just sort of copying some of their ideas, because obviously they made it, they know probably what's the best way to do it. Okay, so you've got the terminals, and you've also got the other ones. So this one, it's the back. There's two types. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So there's the two types there. There's the terminal, and that's just some basic. It's called a column. It's supposed to be some column. Let's put one of each. So let's go Control C. Bring that over here. Yep. Just rotate it a bit. Alternate space. Well, that's interesting. Oh, sorry, I pushed the wrong one. Alternate space, not control space. Okay. So how do you want this? Probably halfway. Oh, it is. It's already done, is it? It's already spaced. It's already connected up. Yeah. We'll have a look at that. I'd like to put that on that side, actually. Let's put that on that side. So just put control space, line that up. That's done. Grab a copy of that. Bring it over. So yeah, so it's actually surprisingly easy and very versatile. Once you've set up everything lined up properly, resized and scaled, and you've confirmed that when you reposition with the right scale you want, it does, all the parts do match up nicely with no gaps. And if there's something a little bit wrong on one of them, like I say, just expand the width or put something at the back of it so that it'll then forcibly move it forward a little bit, or whatever it needs to do. So alternate, space, control, move it back. Let's just put that over there somewhere. So how's that done that? Okay, so that's pretty flush. Looks good, isn't it? Looks pretty good. Pretty flush. Is it looking better? Or stick it out more like that? Yeah, I think flush is pretty good. Let's push that in a bit. It's still sticking out too much, I think. Yeah, anyway, I'll be able to work with that. But you can see how quickly, pretty quick I've made the level. It's a pretty nice little room too. Now doors are different. They won't always scale properly because they're meant to fit within the frames and walls and so forth like that. So you may not want to scale that. This is a door, so for example Control M, that's totally different scale. You might want to just manually line it up and just leave it, and don't rescale it, is probably my recommendation, because they're not meant to be like a wall or floor or a roof that lines up, because they fit within things. I've still pressed Control space and it's moved it a bit, but let's see. Let's push it over here. Which way is which? That one's got to go over that side. So that's okay. Anyway, so yeah, you may just line them up manually. My impression, because it's got to be fit in the middle of a frame or something like that. It's not necessarily going to scale correctly. So that's be nice if the highlight was a bit brighter. There it is. What's it doing 95% for? 90% should be. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's alright now. For some reason it was 95. So just make sure the bottom is down properly. And that's usually pretty good. So that's, at the moment I'm just using the same door, making a copy of it and just moving it. I don't really like these doors. I might swap them out for a better one. I'll just find something better. Because yeah, don't think they made the doors really good. Anyway, so it looks pretty right, I think, for starters. Okay, so I've got here the floor that I want to line up with the other floor, so these other parts here. You'll find that I haven't resized this floor at all since I've imported it to match anything. So when I go measure the size, 16 by 8, yeah, that's pretty good. It's a factor of 2, but this current Y size it's a small fraction. So that's not really going to line up with a whole lot. I don't want to rescale it to be really thick. In terms of chucking out all the proportions of this this floor surface, I don't want to do that, but I do want it to line up with this surface, which is also another 2D plane with a bit of height with it as well. So that's a different one. So that's got a bit of height and then a 3D plane mesh on top, and I want that to line up with this 3D plane mesh. the thing is 3D plane meshes don't scale in the vertical. They can scale on the other two axes, but not in the vertical. So you won't be able to rescale either of those two assets to line up with each other on the vertical height. So in other words, you just have to manually tweak it to get it to work. I'll show you how to do that. If it was like a box, everything was boxed and it had sides, everything had sides and a backing, it was all in a box configuration, it's so much easier to line up things, because even if it doesn't line up perfectly, the seams are covered up by the sides. But with a single flat plane mesh, any gaps, you see the gaps completely. So normally it's fine if you're just lining up single plane meshes and there's no other 3D geometry on it. You can line them up and it won't be a problem. It's fine because they all work the same. But with these two side floor panels, they're not made the same. They're done differently. So to line them up, so in other words, that one's got the geometry below the 3D plane. This one's got the geometry above the flat 3D plane. They don't. That's why they don't line up. So that one, as you can see, 0.09. If I was to try and resize it, there's no resizing. And then if I was to snap to grid, see the gap? It really needs to come up higher. The difference is the difference between the two. It needs to come up to about there. See, there's no gap there. That's pretty much perfect. About there somewhere, so you can't see any gaps. So that's pretty good. Either side, that way or that way. So to fix that, I'll just get rid of that. I've fixed one over here. All you want to do is grab some of the 3D geometry like that. Go create new mesh object. I'll just show you quickly. So there's, what's that called? A3. So you do what you usually do, just left click it, hold it, and drag on top of the floor, that one there, and zero it out, so then it's back in the exact position where it was. So once you've done that, then you can work with it. You can just, if you want, you can just center the pivot point because it's easy to work with. And then what you do, you just move it down. So in other words, you want the you're thickening up below the fixed 3D plane mesh so that it can be in the middle of the whole mesh and have a chance to line up with other things like that. So I think this floor here has below and above mesh. So there's, yeah, I think above the 3D plane mesh, above and below. Whereas this one only had above. So if you need to put some 3D mesh below below the 3D plane, if that makes sense. So that this 3D plane can be basically in the middle of the whole size of the asset. And it's, in terms of the positioning of it, I haven't found an exact mathematical way to do it. There may be a way. That's not the one. Sorry. Where are we? Okay, here. So the positioning, where exactly it needs to be, you're gonna have to just adjust it manually and test it out. So you're gonna have to put it somewhere there and then go Tools, merge that. So merging that back into that, and then you have to combine a single mesh. So you're thickening up the whole thing, and then you center the pivot point, and then check it again, and you keep doing that until you get it about right. Might take a bit of mucking around, actually, to be honest. But this is only in the setting up of the assets to all fit together properly. Once you've done it once for that asset, that's it. It'll be fine. So I've done it for this one. So I've thickened it up with the already, and then you just go center the pivot point, and boom, and it lines up perfectly. So, well, at least very close to perfect. It's so slightly out. I mean, I could muck around with it a little bit more, but it's really, for me, I'm happy with that. So that's lining up with the flat plane here, in other words, so that there's no gap along the seams, or no visible gaps. Yeah, so that's fixed that. There used to be more of a gap. You could see a line, white line here, but now there's no white lines. You can't see the background, in other words. So there's inherent issues when you're using single 3D plane mesh objects with 3D geometry connected together, and you're trying to link them all up and line them all up. It becomes a bit more of a hassle that way. Normally it's one or the other. It's just 3D plane meshes, or it is a full 3D geometry. Usually not. Typically both. Anyway, in this level it has both. So there's the floor. Control C. I just drop that in. There we go. So it's actually quite fast and easy. Once you've got it all done, then it's super easy just to fix it up. So spend a bit of time in the beginning getting all those types of things right, and then you won't have a problem later on. Everything will line up, so that's okay. Yeah, done. So that's that floor. And typically what I do is, okay, so I need to keep a copy. So this is one of these will be the base mesh. I'll make it that one. I'll keep a base mesh copy so I could reuse it for later. And I'll just put that over there somewhere. And I might join all these up. So I might join up, what do we got? A1 to 6. This one joins up with A3. Tools. So once I'm happy with that length, I'm going to reuse this length of floor quite a bit, I think, so that's why I'm merging it. Normally just don't merge it until everything is done and dusted and you're really happy with the design. Otherwise it's a lot harder to change things. I'm going to keep this one and merge that with the other stuff. Just make it easier instead of scrolling up the top all the time. Alright. There it is. So now I can center the pivot point and move it back, and that should snap just fine. Like that. Yep, okay, good, it does. Snaps just fine. Cause it's still, from the X and Z, it's still it's still ratio of the grid scale selected of 2. Yeah, so that's totally fine. Just get rid of that. See, no gaps. Pretty nice actually. Good enough. I mean, you could argue there's a minuscule white line there. I don't think that's going to have any effect at all on the game. Okay, so if I copy that, and now I can start, you know, really speed level design. Okay, so what I've been noticing, the anti-aliasing effect makes jagged edges, makes angled edges, the jaggies they call it, jagged edges, straight. But you can't use it with post-processing. I definitely want to use post-processing, so I can't use anti-aliasing as in CopperCube, but you can override that with your graphics card anyway. So don't use anti-aliasing here, otherwise you don't get any post-processing on the professional and studio version. But you can override that anyway with the control panel of your graphics card. That's what I've done. It seems to work just fine. So I've got here override any application setting, anti-aliasing. So you're still getting anti-aliasing anyway. Pretty sure. So yep. So now in terms of I prefer either, in terms of filtering, I prefer trilinear. Works quite well in most cases. sometimes I'll use anisotropic filtering, but trilinear is pretty good, so I've been testing that out. So now I've joined it up. I want to see no jagged edges, because it was actually looking terrible before because my graphics card didn't have anti-aliasing turned on, it was turned off. So, and I was relying on the tick box in CopperCube to run it, and that would fix it quite nicely, but then you couldn't have any post-processing, so that sucks. So anyways, don't rely on CopperCube anti-aliasing. Okay, you can see a very, very slight, see that line there as you turn creates tiny little jagged edges. It's not very hard, it's hard to see, but it's just very slightly there. How's the floor from a distance? It creates a little bit of, you could call it an artifacts, or it's not sure what you would call that. But anyway, it's a lot better, heaps better. It was looking really terrible before. Yeah, I'm just running at 60 frames per second, just so everything's running as you normally would run it. Yeah, I mean I think it's acceptable. It's okay. There's some imperfections there. Anyway, I'll keep looking into that. But anyway, this video is about how to use the grid to scale plugin. So that floor is good now. Those two floors match each other, in other words, because they were set up differently, and I had to adjust different 3D mesh onto the floor to match the other floor, so that the fixed 3D plane mesh matches off pretty close, or very closely. So yeah, pretty good. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Hope you enjoyed that. Cheers.